Before history was written the way we know it today, before empires defined continents, before borders separated Africa into names and nations, there was a civilization that rose along the Nile River, a civilization rich in gold, iron, temples, and kings. And from this civilization came rulers so powerful, they did something almost unthinkable in ancient history. They conquered Egypt, not as foreigners, but as pharaohs. These were the Kushite kings of Egypt, and their story is one of the greatest forgotten chapters in African history. To understand Kush, we must abandon the idea that ancient Egypt stood alone. The Nile did not begin in Egypt. It began far to the south, in the lands of Nubia and Kush. Early African civilizations flourished here long before the rise of classical Egypt. One of the earliest powerful cultures was centered in Kerma. Kerma was not a village, it was a kingdom. It had monumental architecture, royal cemeteries, and complex political organization. Archaeologists have found massive mud brick structures, luxury goods from Egypt and sub-Saharan Africa, evidence of organized military systems. This region became the foundation of what would later be called the Kingdom of Kush. Kush was born from centuries of development, not sudden emergence. It was African civilization in full complexity. By around 1000 BCE, Egypt was weakening. Internal divisions split the land into competing rulers. This instability created an opening for the south. The Kingdom of Kush rose into power along the Nile. Its early capital became Napata. Napata was more than a political capital, it was a sacred city. At its center stood Jebel Barkal, a mountain believed to be the dwelling place of the god Amun. Here, Kushite kings were crowned as divine rulers. The Kushites adopted Egyptian writing, religion, and royal customs, but they reshaped them into something uniquely their own. They were not absorbing Egypt. They were merging civilizations, and soon, they would lead Egypt itself. In the 8th century BCE, a Kushite king rose with ambition and vision. His name was Pianki. He saw Egypt divided and unstable, but he did not see collapse. He saw destiny. Pa launched a military campaign northward along the Nile. City after city fell under his control. Local rulers surrendered or were defeated. But Pa's campaign was not typical conquest. He demanded religious respect, not destruction. He insisted that the gods of Egypt, especially Amun, be honored properly. This moment changed history. Pa became ruler of all Egypt, establishing the 25th dynasty of Egypt. For the first time in history, Egypt was ruled by kings from Kush, African kings, pharaohs of Nubian origin. But Pa did something unusual after his victory. He returned south to Napata. To him, Kush was the true sacred center of power. After Pa, a dynasty of Kushite pharaohs ruled Egypt. They are often called the Black Pharaohs, not as a modern label, but as a reflection of their Nubian heritage. Among them were Shabaka Shabitku, Taharka Tantamani. They ruled both Egypt and Kush as a single cultural system. They restored temples that had fallen into neglect. They revived ancient religious traditions. They strengthened the priesthood of Amun. They saw themselves not as conquerors, but as restorers of divine order. One of the most powerful Kushite rulers was Taharka. Taharka ruled during one of the most dangerous periods in ancient geopolitics. To the north, the Assyrian Empire was expanding aggressively. To the west and east, smaller kingdoms were shifting alliances. Taharka built massive temples across Egypt and Nubia. He strengthened fortresses. He supported agriculture and trade. But war was inevitable. The Assyrians invaded Egypt multiple times. Despite fierce resistance, Taharka was eventually pushed south. But even in retreat, he remained a symbol of African kingship over Egypt. The Kushite dynasty faced one of the most powerful military forces of the ancient world, Assyria. Assyrian kings such as Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal launched campaigns into Egypt. Their armies were highly organized and equipped with iron weapons and siege engines. The Kushite rulers fought hard to defend their territory, but the balance of power was shifting. Eventually, Kush lost control of Egypt, but unlike many fallen empires, Kush survived. After retreating south, the Kushite civilization shifted its center of power. A new capital emerged, Meroe. Meroe became one of Africa's most remarkable ancient cities. It was rich in iron production, one of the earliest industrial centers in Africa. Long-distance trade networks unique, art and architecture. The pyramids of Meroe still stand today, over 200 of them. They are smaller than Egyptian pyramids, but far more numerous. They represent a distinct Kushite identity. Meroe was sometimes called the Island of Gold due to its wealth and resources. Kush was not only ruled by kings, it was also ruled by powerful queens known as Candaces. These women were warriors, diplomats, and sovereign leaders. One of the most famous was Amenarrenas, who led resistance against Roman expansion centuries later. The Candaces showed that Kushite political power was not limited by gender. It was a society where leadership could rise from both men and women of royal lineage. Kushite religion was deeply spiritual. They worshipped Amun as a central deity, linking their authority to divine approval. But Kush also maintained its own cultural traditions, distinct burial customs, local languages alongside Egyptian influence, unique artistic styles. They were not Egyptianized Africans in a simple sense. They were a hybrid civilization, African at its core, Nile-connected in identity. Over time, trade routes shifted. Environmental changes affected agriculture. New powers emerged in the region. By around the 4th century CE, Meroe declined and was eventually abandoned. But Kush did not vanish overnight. It faded slowly, leaving behind ruins, pyramids, and unanswered questions in the desert sands. The Kushite kings of Egypt challenge everything we think we know about ancient history. They show us that Africa was not a passive observer of ancient civilization. It was a creator of empires, a builder of kings, a center of power. And for nearly a century, African kings ruled Egypt itself. The Black Pharaohs are not myth. They are history, waiting to be fully remembered